It was meant to be just another promotional morning segment, a typical glossy television moment packed with warm smiles, light banter, and rehearsed talking points. But what transpired that day on The View between seasoned political journalist and commentator Megyn Kelly and the polarizing Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, transformed live television into a cultural battlefield and ignited a media firestorm that would leave millions stunned. For in the space of a single interview, what began as a conversation quickly exploded into an unscripted, unfiltered confrontation that peeled back the polished veneers both women are known for and revealed a raw and blistering clash of ideologies, ego, and truth. And as Meghan Markle appeared on the iconic talk show to promote her newest lifestyle venture, a philanthropic wellness initiative laced with carefully curated talking points about mental health, motherhood, and media responsibility, she was fully prepared for a friendly, affirming environment, especially given the show's progressive leanings and supportive tone in past interviews. But what she was not prepared for was Megyn Kelly, who had been invited as a guest co-host for the day, sitting across from her in sharp, neutral tones and an expression that gave nothing away, armed not with platitudes but with precision. And from the moment the two locked eyes, it was clear the conversation was heading toward uncharted waters, because Kelly, a former Fox News powerhouse known for holding her own against the likes of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, was not interested in tea-sipping niceties or Instagrammable soundbites. And while the other hosts offered warm greetings, Kelly remained cool, even clinical, as she introduced her first question with measured restraint, asking Megyn how she reconciles her frequent public criticisms of media intrusion with her equally frequent and deliberate appearances on global platforms. And though Megyn responded with her trademark poise, speaking about reclaiming the narrative and owning her truth, Kelly's follow-up was where the sparks truly began to fly, as she leaned in and said, "But isn't that a bit of a contradiction? You say you want privacy, yet you and your husband inked multi-million-dollar deals with Spotify, Netflix, and write memoirs and documentaries that pull the curtain back on your most intimate family issues. At what point is it about privacy? At what point is it about control?" And the question landed like a thunderclap, silencing the studio momentarily and prompting Megyn to flash the kind of tight smile that hinted at both discomfort and disdain, replying that asking for privacy does not mean silence, that being public figures doesn't entitle the media to exploit their lives. But Kelly, unfazed, doubled down, stating flatly that public life comes with scrutiny, and selective transparency erodes credibility, especially when the public is asked to believe every side of the story without being allowed to ask questions. And thus began the unraveling of what was supposed to be a controlled appearance. As Kelly transitioned into a rapid-fire list of contradictions and public statements made by Markle that seemed to shift over time, from the disputed wedding timeline in the Oprah interview, to her claims of isolation within the royal family, to the estrangement from her own father, to the tension with her sister, and the allegations of bullying made by former palace staff, which Kelly carefully recited not as accusations, but as unresolved narratives that the public had been asked to accept without scrutiny. And Megyn, visibly rattled now, responded by accusing Kelly of doing what many in the media had done to her for years, focusing on drama over substance, stoking division rather than dialogue, and launched into a passionate defense of her right to tell her story her way, invoking her race, her gender, her status as an outsider in a traditionally rigid institution, and the trauma she claimed to have experienced during and after her time with the royal family. But Kelly cut in sharply, saying, "We can acknowledge racism, misogyny, and outdated institutions without pretending that celebrity victimhood is the same as systemic injustice," and the room fell deadly quiet as Whoopi Goldberg tried to mediate, attempting to steer the conversation back toward the original topic of mental health awareness. But the tension between Kelly and Markle had become the only thing anyone could pay attention to, with the studio audience shifting uncomfortably and viewers at home flooding social media in real time with their takes on the Showdown. As Kelly pressed forward now, citing Megyn's statements from her infamous cut-off Spotify podcast and the criticisms from her former staff and family. And Megyn, whose composure was beginning to crack under the weight of what felt like a legal cross-examination, tried to pivot toward her children, her charitable efforts, and her desire to use her platform to uplift marginalized voices. But Kelly again interjected, asking whether Megyn believed she herself had become a distraction from those causes, and whether her narrative fatigue risked undermining the very empathy she often appealed to. And Megyn, cornered and clearly offended, accused Kelly of having a vendetta and of treating her as a political pawn instead of a person, to which Kelly replied with the line that would dominate headlines for days: "It's not a vendetta to ask questions. It's journalism. What you're asking for is not fairness, insanity from critique." And with that, the moment became permanently etched into television history, as Megyn briefly went silent, her eyes narrowing, her posture defensive, and after a brief and visibly strained attempt to continue the interview, she politely but firmly ended her segment early, removing her earpiece and thanking the panel with the kind of brittle civility that masked deep anger, exiting the stage, 2 stunned silence and an emergency commercial break that producers scrambled to fill. and when the show returned, the tone was subdued. The remaining co-hosts trying to smooth over the incident while Megyn Kelly remained calm, composed, and unapologetic, offering that while she respected Meghan's right to tell her story, public accountability was not harassment, it was necessary for trust. And in the hours and days that followed, the internet erupted with opinion pieces, TikTok breakdowns, YouTube reaction videos, and endless Twitter threads dissecting every glance, word, and breath of the encounter, with hashtags like #MEGYNVsMeghan, #RoyalClashLive, and #ViewMeltdown trending globally, as some praised Kelly as the only journalist brave enough to hold Markle accountable, while others condemned her as aggressive and toned up to the nuance of Meghan's lived experience. And Meghan's camp released a short statement emphasizing her commitment to advocacy and respectful dialogue, carefully avoiding any direct mention of Kelly, while Kelly, ever the provocateur, doubled down in later interviews, stating that fame does not entitle anyone to be immune from follow-up questions, that authenticity means standing in your truth even when it's uncomfortable, and that her intention was not to destroy Meghan, but to give voice to the millions who had long felt shut out of the conversation by celebrity privilege cloaked in social justice language. And as the dust began to settle, what remained was a scorched television stage and a public more divided than ever, with Meghan Markle's supporters calling for media reforms and more empathetic storytelling, while Kelly's supporters celebrated her refusal to be silenced by optics or popularity. And the producers of The View, meanwhile, were left both shaken and elated, having hosted what was perhaps the most watched and most divisive segment in the show's history. But for Meghan Markle, the day marked yet another chapter in her long and turbulent relationship with the press. And for Megyn Kelly, it was a defining moment of journalistic assertion that reaffirmed her brand as a woman unafraid to speak bluntly in a world addicted to soft focus. And so the clash between them became more than a media moment, it became a mirror held up to the public's ever-deepening divide on celebrity, credibility, and the line between empathy and accountability, between storytelling and strategy, between royalty and reality. And in the end, it wasn't just about who won the argument, but about what the argument revealed, about the chasm between perception and truth, and about the power and peril of asking the questions no one else dares to ask. Live, unfiltered, and in front of the entire world.